You're listening to Dirty Feet, a podcast from No More Radio.
Vous écoutez le podcast Dirty Feet sur les ondes de No More Radio.
Hosted by,
Animé par
Allison Burns,
JD Papillon,
et Stéphanie Morin-Robert.
Stay tuned.
We're gonna move you.
Good morning and welcome to our 116th episode of Dirty Feet. This very cold morning, we are lucky to have Sonya Stefan here with us to warm up the studio. And we will be having a delightful conversation with her, talking about her involvement in Dana Gingras' piece that will be presented very soon, the 11th, 12th, and 13th at 8 p.m. at l'Agora de la Danse. And this piece is called In Between Maybe. This conversation will evolve around not only her involvement as a collaborative dancer in the work, but also the different textures in the work involving around music, around the inspiration behind the work, which touches a lot on different video terminology in cinema work. So let's jump right in.
So today we're welcoming Sonya Stefan, who is a performer and artistic collaborator, I guess we could say, for this week's Animals of Distinction presentation, choreographed by Dana Gingras. The show is called Somewhere Between Maybe, and that's going to be at the Agora de la Danse on February 11th, 12th, and 13th at 8 p.m. Sonya Stefan, it's not our first time welcoming you in the studio. It's our first time welcoming you as a dancer and performer in a show, though. So, hi, how are you doing today?
I'm really cold, but everything is really good.
Yeah, so just so that everyone knows, this episode is being recorded on the Monday morning. You'll probably be listening to it on the Tuesday. Hopefully by then it's not going to be as cold, but this morning it's hella cold. So hi, Sonya again. So yeah, this is a project that actually started 2 years ago. Could you tell us a bit about the genesis of this project? Because there is a really interesting story behind how this project came together.
Yes, the project started where Jamie Wright and I were matched with Dana at a Montreal Dance choreographic research workshop. And what was really interesting about this workshop is that it's 1 week, and it's the goal is not to have a product by the end of the week. It's really process orientated, and every day you go into a studio with the choreographer, they talk about their ideas, you workshop them, and then at the end of the day, you show the ideas to the rest of the other choreographers, the other dancers, the other dance theorists. And as a group, everyone discusses the work. And I love this idea because it doesn't put anyone in a hierarchy. Everybody's in the same situation and really, really interested in the work. Why are we doing things? What is the process? What are alternative ways of finding movements or approaching the choreographer's idea? So, yeah, I think it was 2 years ago that Dana was matched with both of us. And for me, it was interesting because I didn't know Dana beforehand. It was my first time meeting her. So it was really like a new meeting of an artist. And Jamie I knew before, and everybody, I don't know if everyone knows, but Jamie Wright is quite fantastic as a dancer, as an interpreter. She teaches, she does like multiple things in the dance world. So I have like a big connection with Jamie and Dana just because of how we function within the dance world.
And for people who might not be aware of this week of choreographic research is also, there's a parallel thing happening during it, which the people doing the choreographic research are also doing, and it's the morning talks. I think it's called Let's Talk.
Yes.
And, you might introduce it better than me, but basically it's a series of guests every morning of the week coming in to discuss different aspects of dance and of creation. who do you remember being those guest lecturers?
I love those lectures because I find that they bridge this connection with people who are in the milieu doing it, as well as academics who are really interested in what we do. And it really spans, like Chris Salter from Hexagram came, and he has a big connection with media and dance, and I'm also really interested in that. Linda Goudreau came this year, Philip Spoor, Erin Manning, who's also, she works at Concordia. She's done lots of research, the connection of performance, and
Larry Lavender also has been doing it for a few years.
Yeah, he comes every year and talks a lot about form, about how we are in the studio, how we gather and give information. And also I find that those morning talks develop kind of a way of speaking about work. It helps us practice that. It helps us meet people that might not be in the performance milieu, but are still doing incredibly interesting things outside of the dance milieu and really connected to dance. So the workshop is really amazing in that respect. And then we, in the afternoon go and work in a studio. And then at night, like I said, we do this showing and this discussion, and everybody's part of the discussion. And the choreographers after have to go through a dinner with the mentors, and they even discuss it more. So it's quite intense the whole week. But I feel like it touches upon multiple aspects of dance, which I find fascinating.
And you're talking about how during the afternoons people go into studios and work. Is it everyone in the same studio at the same time? Is it all of the pairings together? Is it split into different studios?
Every year it happens, most of the years it happens at Agora de la Danse, but they use the studios at on the 4th floor at UQAM. The studio theater in the bottom floor that used to be Tangente. So usually there's 4 choreographers matched with 2 dancers, and everybody goes into their studio, but every day the studio rotates. So one day you might end up with a really tiny, studio, or you might have the big theater at Agora de la Danse, or the studios upstairs, which all kind of require a different approach, because all those spaces with moving bodies, it's different. The context, the feeling of how the work progresses is always really different approaches. But what's nice is that every day it changes. So every day you're faced with new challenges and questions.
And that year with Dana Gingras and Jamie Wright, what's your memory of how that merging of the two performers and the choreographer came together? Because yourself working a lot as a choreographer, you probably came to it with your own expectations to some extent. How did it go working with someone that you didn't really know, someone else that you knew a bit, but for the first time working together? How did that go throughout the week with the process?
It's funny talking about that beginning. It's funny, that beginning process kind of set us up for the whole process. I remember that Dana talked a lot about cinema terms like jump cutting. She talked about the space in between, the idea of image, of being in the space where either something had just happened or will happen. So really, really that in-between space. Also, she brought objects into the room, very unspectacular objects like a bucket, which Jamie and I worked a lot with and still are working with the bucket. And so again, it was kind of, it laid the groundwork of Dana giving us information of what she's interested in. And again, because it's not product based, she was kind of free to explore it any way she wanted. Also in that first week, you kind of understood that she really wanted Jamie and I to speak about what we thought or our ideas. And so there was a real complicity between us. And so it really, really set us up for the next 2 years. And what was really interesting about this process is that she never videoed it. We wrote things on cards. We went to visit Christian Marclay, the clock, at the MAC, because she was, again, really influenced by his work. And we looked at books, and, we talked a ton. And so that was what was so interesting, is that she didn't video record us each time. It was really just kind of a process that lived in our bodies, in our minds, as we went along.
Now, one thing that's really interesting, because I haven't seen that piece, I've never seen Dana Gingras' solo work, but talking about, hearing you talk about her interests, there's a huge parallel that can be made with yours. You're doing your MFA at Concordia in cinema studies. Mm-hmm. And you're also very interested in bringing in props, exploring the relationship between, people and their environment. Did you feel that artistically speaking, you found a sort of connection there right away with the choreographer?
Yes. Right away, when I knew that Dana was interested in cinema and also in expanded cinema, so works that people would show in galleries, or maybe they would in performance modes, those kind of things, there was like an immediate connection to that. And again with Jamie as well, like I said, I've known Jamie a really, really long time. It's the first time that we've danced together, and there's I would say that I feel like I understand the way Jamie moves, and she understands the way I move. And so again, there's another complicity between us. And so yeah, it was easy to connect to this work. I mean, I'm interested in the exact same things that Dana's interested in. She has kind of a different approach to it, but there's definitely bridgeways between her and me.
So jumping 2 years later, after the three of you have met and kind of created all of these links and understood each other and worked on the process without necessarily thinking of the final product. But now there is a final product. So where did that happen? The link or that transition between just working on these concepts and researching to actually establishing something a little more clear and building a show?
I would say it happened fairly recently, but which is quite funny because there's a big connection to there's an object in the show, the record players, and there's one particular record that I've heard a lot. It's The Caretaker, and we use this album, and I mean, it really got so much part of my DNA that I sing it and I don't even realize I'm singing it, like as I'm picking up my daughter from work and from school, sorry. So fairly recently, this record kind of helped us form the piece. And so again, like the connection to objects. So record players, there's a bucket. I don't know if you've seen in the photos, there's these plastic cheap prosthetics that we wear. Mm-hmm. There's a mask. All very linking to the idea of image and the connection of body, image, space, object. So the record player and the record actually helped us formulate the piece and kind of gave us a structure and everything, a timeline. Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. Mm-hmm. A timeline. And then as well as that, I would say, I didn't mention this, but there was also the idea of working in and outside of the frame. So the space actually gave us a lot of structure as well, meaning like where our bodies or our relationships in terms of being in the frame, outside of the frame, what is the perspective of the frame, how are people looking at the work, from what perspective are they looking at the work. So all those things, and I'd say in the last year, kind of all came together.
And when it comes to the link with the artwork and the clock, did it influence mostly the idea of time in the piece, like of the approach to time, of the time being lived by the performers? Is it something like akin to, I would say maybe Gilles Deleuze, the concept of image-temps? Mm-hmm. Is that how this influenced the approach of the work, or?
I would say definitely. There's definitely a side A and a side B. And yes, okay, Christian Marclay's The Clock. There's a certain structure and form in it. and the sense of time. Like when you go to see that piece at 1 a.m, you realize cinema structures. Like there's a lot of vampire movies where people wake up, and then there's a lot of like murders and stuff like that. At 4 o'clock, there's a lot of people getting home from work and going for a drink. So and it has a lot of relationship with how real life is. So that work really, really accentuates cinema structures, cinema narrative structures. In this piece, I would say that it's kind of the same. Like there's a certain sense of time, and movement is really the perception of movement, the amount of movement, the quality of movement, the texture of movement. Again, the relationships that we have with the space, the objects, each other. It kind of, I would say the beginning kind of allows you to understand a sense of time. And then as you get into the work, there's a sense of loss of time, especially with the music of The Caretaker. I don't know if you've heard it. It loops a lot. Mm-hmm. It feels like for me, it feels like a music that I heard when I was very young, taking ballet class, but I was in the hallway, putting on my shoes. You hear this far away music. So the sense of time, for me, it's like you can't place it really.
Almost like dreamlike in another.
Yeah. Yeah, dreamlike and almost
hazy.
Not like hazy. It's perfect. Yeah, it really has that sense of being in between, because it's music that you feel like you recognize, but you don't know where the beginning or end is. So it's, the looping feeling is definitely there without knowing it's there.
It's interesting to think about this aspect of this haziness and this being in between the spaces, and to put this into context with something you mentioned before we started the recording, where you were saying that it's very much, to some extent, about being in a present moment. Mm-hmm. It's very much about being focused on what you're doing and being able to make choices on the fly. How do you feel that this might be a dichotomy or a tension that was desired by the choreographer, to have this sort of like floating headspace with this very in the present moment physicality and mentality of what you're doing on stage?
I know that when Dana and I met her at the MAC. It was after show. She had arrived. We both had arrived kind of after the show was over, and we were both commenting how interesting it is to be in a space after or before a show. Like you sense that something happened. You have the energy of what happened. So that's what's interesting. Yeah, for this piece, we're definitely in the present because our attention has to be really like 100%. But again, you get lost. You do have the sense that you had just missed the moment, or you're about to get into the moment. So it's a very strange feeling, like within my body and within my mind, and it's amazing that I feel like that we've accomplished. Like I feel I have accomplished that feeling through the process that we went through. So yes, I feel like there's a double nature to the piece.
It's interesting. It's making me think of this quote that I'm going to paraphrase by Jim Jarmusch, the filmmaker, where he was saying that in most conventional cinema, you're going to be filming the important points in a narrative, in the story, in what's being shown on screen. So you're going to have the guy who wakes up, eats breakfast, then it cuts just as he's getting into his car. Then it's going to cut back to him getting out of the car and heading to work. But for him as a filmmaker, what he said that was interesting was those moments in between of what happens on his ride to work in the car, and just him, basically just looking at his surroundings, changing the music, drinking his coffee, and those moments that are not purely entertaining, but there's an authenticness, a genuineness to them. Is this something that, as part of the process, you felt difficult to elaborate on? Because those are not the entertaining moments. Those are not the moments that we're going to go towards when we're trying to create a show, because we want to keep the audience satisfied. We want to keep the audience entertained. do you feel that there was a sort of voluntary shift towards those moments that we wouldn't really focus on when creating a piece for public consumption?
You have such very interesting words like entertainment, public consumption. Those words, those are interesting to me. The mundane, when put together in interesting ways, becomes very, very interesting to me because they can create narrative or a state or a feeling or information of some sort. So for me, we say mundane, but it's not mundane. We all know that most filmmaking, I mean, it's changing now, but, Hollywood, controlled it all, and there was a certain way of telling a story. But now there's many, many filmmakers who work outside of the context of that, and they, like Kristen Marclay, it's a film geek extraordinaire, who went out and got hundreds and hundreds of film to make a timeline to create 24 hours. And like I said, that work, it gives you different information. You start understanding cinema structures, how, I guess I'll use this word, manipulation of storytelling. So in a way, it's such a mundane task to do that. And, but the outcome is really, really interesting. And I think it's the same with this piece. Like the objects are like cheap objects, and they're specific objects, and the movement is very specific, and maybe we could say pared down or really to its essence, and with all the elements put together, I feel like it created a really, really interesting piece that I think that Dana's it's really a departure from her other work. She really wanted to explore something else. And I think she has done that in this piece. So,
speaking about these objects, and I'm looking at the photos and the video, and there's bright colors, and there is that kind of the cheapness that you're talking about in the quality of these masks and these buckets and things, and I can't tell if there's humor there or if it's more of like a almost grotesqueness.
I think it's in between.
Yeah.
the photos, Austin Young took the photos. He's from LA. For me, it was fantastic that he was from LA because my first dance experience, like when I was 19, I went to LA to be a dancer. So when he showed up, I'm like, all right, the LA photographer showed up. Anyway, Austin is an amazing person. You should check out his work. But I have to say that photo shoot, the four of us laughed all day long. Like usually dance photo shoots are, I don't know what your experience is.
So serious.
They're serious, and you have to be good, and you have to look beautiful. And the fact that my hair is like a disaster, and I'm wearing my awful jogging pants, like I was in love with the whole day. And I have to say it was one of the funnest days I've had in a photo shoot. So yeah, in terms of the bright colors, I mean, cheap objects, I don't know, they're bright. I think that's the only way to say it. And like I'm wearing my horrible, like that purple shirt's my painting shirt, and Jamie has that awesome shirt that says I'm very popular. And one thing about Jamie, I realized she loves t-shirts that have things on them, like sayings. So when you see Jamie, you should just check out her t-shirts. And so, yeah, it was definitely a day of kind of laughing. And again, even I love the video. It's Mark who shot the video. It's very lo-fi. He used, I think it's called, he used Super 8 as well as, I think it's called a Sony Portapack. I have to check, which was a camera that they had made, I think, for... it was like a Barbie product for kids, and he shot with this camera. And again, I was in love with that process because it's
there's this very grainy image to it, right? Much in the way that some filmmakers have started to go back and using filters to change their image to give it that sense. But with this, based on what you're saying, the technology used that was part of it. It wasn't just something that was altered afterwards. It was actually how the image was captured.
Yeah.
Right from the start.
Yeah.
It gives like a record player texture.
Yeah, and
which links really well.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because the objects in the room, whereas some of them were bought new, some are old objects. Like, an example, the record players is the biggest example. And I think that's another link that I have, is this connection of not having hierarchy over objects. Like, I don't care if the camera is super fancy or not fancy. I would still be the same person in front of it. So that's what's interesting about this. Again, it's all in between all these things, image, how, like, Austin's photos are quite bright and clear, and versus the video. So,
Well, going back to the video, there's another really striking element in it, which is the use of mirrors as part of the scenography. And it's not something that we see in the pictures at all, but it seems very prevalent in the piece based on what we see in the video. How much of the scenography is actually just mirrors, other than the props being used?
It's interesting because during that process, we had brought all the objects in, hence there were lots of things there. And Linda Goudreau had come in, and at one point she's like, "You got to take out all the objects. There's too many." Like, she made us wipe the stage, so there's actually no mirrors in the show anymore. And so it was there at that moment in time when we were in that process. But now we've had to sadly take away certain objects that we were in love with, but we had to take them away because it didn't add to the work. So at this moment, it's like stripped down objects, stripped down movement, and again, different time structures.
We haven't talked much about the physicality yet. We've talked a lot about the process. We've talked a lot about all of the surrounding elements, but the physicality, you were saying before we started recording that it is a big departure from Dana's usual work. I've never seen her solo work, but what I remembered from Holy Body Tattoo and from videos she's done, it was very high intensity movement, very choreographed, very precise. For this piece, it is a departure. In what way exactly is it?
I would say she was really interested, again, with cinema ideas. So there was the idea of inside and outside of the frame. So she talked a lot about that. We talked a lot about how in cinema, when they cut from one scene to another scene, there's like something called match on action. Like, you see someone close the door, and then the next scene you see them leaving. You don't actually see them go through the whole process. So, or there's another technique called, again, jump cutting. A lot of experimental filmmakers use that, where it's one image jumps to another image, and there's a flipping back and forth, so it has a stutter effect. We use another type of movement idea called alien body, where so there's like a superimposition feeling to it, where you sense, when you're in your body, but you can't quite sense it. You're in that in-between state, kind of like when you're too drunk and you can't feel your body anymore, but you're still dancing. So you're like,
Mom, if you're listening, I've never been in a state like that.
But there's no drunk feeling, but it's this alien feeling of your body. So we have that. Also, there's this trying to match the other person's body. So Jamie's doing something, I try to physicalize what she's doing, but I'm always behind, or maybe I jump ahead of her, but I never quite match her perfectly. So again, for me, it's kind of a superimposition feeling. Jump cutting. Oh, I should talk about prompting. That was one of the first things that she talked about, was prompting. So she had recorded simple prompts that we had placed in an iPod, and Jamie had her iPod, I had my iPod, and for 2 months we worked on, we would hear a prompt, we would react, and it's not reaction, but we would just do it, the movement, purely as it required. So the movement almost became an object. And I would say even to this day, those four or five things is what we use in the piece, is prompting, jump cutting, alien body. I can't remember what else. And really, really idea of outside of the frame. So Jamie and I we do things outside of the stage space. So from the beginning to the end, we're in it. Like, we never actually go off stage and just hang out or drink water or whatever. But like, we're from the beginning to the end, we're in it. And so there's this idea also from cinema that you might hear something, but you might not necessarily see the image. Like I remember Dana brought us all, and we went and watched Psycho, Hitchcock. We talked a lot about his usage of framing, camera work, sound. So there was a lot of relationship with those cinema techniques or cinema tools, and we just reworked it in for us.
Dana's no stranger to Montreal, but she does come from Vancouver, and I'm wondering if there is, if that has had any impact on, or if you've noticed anything about the way that she works, or the things that she's interested in, that you
from Vancouver
that would be specific to where she comes from, or it like working with her versus working with Montreal artists. Is there?
I feel like she is a Montreal artist because she's been here a while. Hence, like, I feel like I'm a Montreal artist, even though I'm not from here. But I've been here, like, I don't know, 14, 15 years. I feel that all the work I've done has been with people here. All the people I'm in love with are people from here. I love other people in Canada, but I love the people here a lot. And, I mean, I haven't asked Dana how long she's been here, but I know that she's got the space, the stable, where she teaches gyrotonics, and I know that since she's been on her own, all her work has been here. She's based here. So for me, she's a Montreal artist.
And this process is very similar to things that really inspire yourself as an artist, and you're actually studying something that has a lot of parallels, and has that fed your research and what you're doing right now at Concordia. And how is that going? Or do you feel it exhausting to have to juggle all these things?
No, actually, ever since I finally understood what I'm interested in and I start following the things that I'm really, really interested in, instead of trying to make money and try to be with the cool choir. I don't know, whatever those things you do as a young person. Which I think we all can admit we did. Concordia, I'm in the cinema department. I'm an oddity because in the studio arts program, I'm the only dance person. In some ways, I kind of love that because I'm meeting all kinds of people, open media, sculptors, painters, all kinds of artists. And once I start talking about dance, they're very interested. So I feel like I'm connecting them to my world, and then I get connected to their world. And then if I know somebody in the dance world who likes that, I try to connect them. It's funny enough, last night I just finished, every year I've been archiving the underground dance community. I recently photographed Short and Sweet, and I bought this fancy camera that I realized, I actually can control and take images of people who I love and respect, and I want to, So I just finished my 2014 year of photos that I was lucky enough to capture. In terms of my own stuff, I guess for me, image and dance has a huge link. Me and my past, how people have portrayed me. I let myself be portrayed a certain way, and all those questions of how we are, how we are on stage, the way we. Sorry, now you're talking. I have to talk about me. It's so confusing, but Concordia has been amazing because it's led me to meet other people who have outside thoughts of performance, and I find those people really, really interesting. And then I find also the people doing, like I, for example, Short and Sweet as an example, I find all those people really, really interesting because they're a blend of so many different things and their approach to making work. And so that's it. So Concordia was like a perfect choice for me.
Now, one thing that you've mentioned quite a few times, when it comes to process, when it comes to how you thought about creating the show and the framing is very much linked to the gaze. Is this something that is prevalent, this idea of the gaze, and how that gaze can be influenced, bringing the attention to specific aspects of the show? How exactly did the choreographer and the performers approach that idea of the gaze, of the audience watching?
So right from the beginning, this is something Dana actually talked about at the Montréal Dance Choreographic Workshop. The work has a specific point of view, especially agora, the way the seats are versus the stage. If you, there's a very steep rake. So she really placed people at the top of the space, of the viewing space where the seats are, so that you can see the work as a whole picture. You can take it all in, just like you would a cinema frame. So again, the idea of inside, outside of the frame would be there. And so that's it. So the way you view the work is as much part of the work as all the other aspects that I spoke about. So this viewing, it really, again, it comes from cinema point of view, camera work, the way images are framed.
And one thing that's quite often used in visual storytelling is going to be specific elements that are meant to attract the gaze, also like a sort of I don't know how to express that, but elements that are meant to come at the forefront of the image, so that your eye is attracted to it, so that the rest becomes more background. Were those elements of thinking this will become the central element for the gaze? Did this come a lot into play in how you need to perform the work?
Yeah. Yes. I guess I should mention this too. The team, like there's Roger Tellerfer-Craig. He's also has sound in it, and Miko is doing the lights. Simone, the scenography. So what's interesting about all these things is all these people, especially at the end of the process, were all in the room, and we all talked about what are we looking at, or what is not the important element, but what is the element that comes alive in this moment or that moment, or is there too many things competing at the same time? Like, where is the gaze? And so that definitely came into the discussion. What I loved about it, that it wasn't only like, oh, where's Sonya and Jamie? It was like, where are everything all at the same time? So we could be talking about the bucket or the masks, or the not having the masks, or the space. Like the space in itself is as much as a performer as we are, which I really like this idea, because of course dance space, artwork space, it's a huge element that I think that we talk about, and it's a really important element in the piece.
So that, and that said, once this piece is performed here in Montreal at l'Agora de la Danse, are there plans to have this performed anywhere else, and how would that shift the work? And will you guys allow yourself to be more selective of what space in particular you would like it to be presented in? Because the space seems to have quite the impact on the actual final product, or on the experience for the audience, and also for you and Jamie as performers.
That was interesting, because we talked about whether this piece could, there was a joke about, could this be theater? Like, could this be post-dramatic theater? Or the thing about the space, though, also, we kind of are very malleable. Like, when we work at the stable, the space is really different than Agora. And I feel like the piece can live in that space and be as strong in that space, but it's definitely a different viewing experience. You definitely have a different gaze, the way you would see all the objects and us in the space. So it doesn't have to be an agora. It's just that in this instance, there was a lot of talk about that space because we knew. But I think that she has opportunity to do it in other spaces. That's what's going to be fun about it, is like, what is this space? Like, how are we going to be? What are we going to do? How are the elements going to come together in that space? And so the fact that the work is malleable, I don't know if Dana would say that. You'd have to ask her after the show, but that's what I would say. So
it makes it very like a magical presence almost to have to, be in that malleable state to just be kind of ready for, like, oh, actually, we're not doing it at l'Agora tonight.
Yeah, because I mean, like, I always have fantasies to do it, and like, let's do it at a music show, or I don't know, like just the spaces that we don't belong, that we do belong, that we're in between. Like, I always have those fantasies, but I think those guys would, I mean, I know that Jamie and Dana would probably be up for it, but yeah, I know we have talked about the life after Agora. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I'm excited to see, so it's to be seen.
Well, before that, anyway, there's going to be the short Agora that's coming right up. Just to remind everyone of the dates, the piece is called Somewhere Between Maybe. It's by the company Animals of Distinction, choreographed by Dana Gingras, in collaboration with her dancers Sonya Stefan, who's with us right now in the studio, and Jamie Wright. And that will be at the Agora de la Danse, of course, February 11th, 12th, 13th at 8 p.m. in Montreal. Now, before we go, you've mentioned the caretaker. Is there an excerpt we could listen to of the caretaker? Is it like the name of the album, or is it a song?
It's
the whole album.
It's a whole album. My side is called The Relationship That Has Just Begun, or The Relationship That Had Begun. There's something about a relationship. It's because I'm in love right now, so I got the relationship side. Anyway.
Again, framing. Yeah. I decided to remember this aspect because of that. So before we go, well, thank you so much, Sonya Stefan, for coming on in this studio, in the recording studio with us today, to talk about animals of distinction with Somewhere Between Maybe. And before we go, we'll be listening to an excerpt from the album The Caretaker. Thank you so much, Sonya.
Thank you, guys.
Dirty Feet was previously recorded at the Montreal Improv Theatre and is currently recorded out of Mainline Theatre. Thanks, dudes.
Dirty Feet est produit et animé par,
produced and hosted by Allison Burns,
JD Papillon,
et Stéphanie Morin-Robert.
You can find out more about our show at nomoreradio.com, follow us on Twitter at Dirty Feet, and find us on Facebook at Dirty Feet Podcast.
Vous pouvez écouter tous nos épisodes sur notre site web ou vous pouvez vous abonner également sur iTunes à notre podcast.
Listen to past episodes on website or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes.
While you're there, be sure to give us a rating and or leave a comment to help us spread the word.
Tune in next week for a whole new show.